report on my computer and start that and see if we can use that to our advantage as far as our committee activities going forward. One of the things as we put together our agenda for this call here is to keep it open and primarily, for two purposes. One, it's the first set of our meetings this year. So as we look ahead at planning on a calendar year basis, it's always good for us to tap into what may be on the minds of our members. There's issues and topics related to the food markets that many of you deal with every single day that are quite unique to the broader business of reusable packaging. And so it's always a good time for us to identify areas that are of priority, say, that we see on the horizon or actively working on today. The other area is to try and use these committee meetings for one of the key purposes is that forum for members to come together and to talk about common issues. Even though we're in a video, chat setting, it's always good for us to be able to have maybe a conversation about things going forward, not just with the committee, but anything else that may be on the minds, in particular here with the food and beverage market. So not only helping us set the agenda and serving as a prioritization of topics this year, but also to make sure that we're providing time for members to be able to engage with each other as part of the networking value that we know RPA has. I have found, certainly in my case, that we put together a robust agenda, have a lot of things we want to cover, a lot of detail to share, and then perhaps we don't leave enough time for member engagement on the topic. So that's one of the other reasons we want to keep this agenda fairly loose today as a starting point. I would like to kick it off to remind everybody that we are governing this call to the RPA antitrust policy, which we've reviewed in the past, and a copy of that is in the RPA members only section of our website if you need to refer to the antitrust policy statement. I also wanted to recap from the meeting on December 28th, right at in between the two holidays. And actually, we had a really good turnout. We were able to talk about, some of the key topics of our work last year. Certainly COVID-19, and that continues to be an area for us to work on as an industry, making sure that we're examining what that impact would be for food contact surfaces, for example, related to reusability in the food marketplace. We also continue to focus on the traceability rule that FDA has issued and proposed. In fact, they extended the comment period into February. So that's something that's still accepting comments, and RPA is looking to participate. Not so much, again, that we're going to be changing the way they may look to govern or regulate for traceability purposes, but primarily for us is to position reusable packaging systems as that preferred platform for delivering on the objectives of the Smarter Food Safety Initiative. We also talked about some of the other industry issues that we flagged as continued importance for our industry and areas we want to work on, which we can talk more today. The committee chair role, something I mentioned in my email on Friday, is that we are looking for a chair for the committee for this year. If anybody is interested in serving in this leadership position, please reach out to me. We could talk more about what that entails. In many ways, it's an area to, for our members to be engaged more at the leadership level of RPA. Committee chair positions do attend our board of directors meeting. In fact, it's often looked upon as a nice stepping stone to arrive at a seat on the board of directors. This was actually established by design many years ago, that committee participation, particularly the leadership role of the chair, would be that nice filter or funnel, if you will, into further leadership positions within the industry. So give it some thought, and please let me know if you're interested. I would love to talk with you about what that role is, and certainly what it entails as far as time management and other opportunities that there may be. Finally, as far as recapping, we went ahead and looked at the full year of planning our meetings, particularly these updated conference calls. And this being the first one, we did set that for every other month. That does leave open the opportunity to convene whenever an issue arises or an opportunity may be presented for us to get together as a group. Looking ahead, I will be modifying some of that scheduling, largely because of holidays. I think Memorial Day, there's some interference, and perhaps I think maybe the week of Thanksgiving as well. Although I'll take a look to see if that is an issue. But when we target the end of month, sometimes we run into those holidays, and so we may just have to move forward 1 week or back 1 week. And I'll be looking to do that over the course of this year as far as our regular meeting schedule. The other note on that is that we are looking to have an in-person meeting for this committee. And the logical outlook would be to tie it into the PAC Expo show at the end of September, assuming that goes forward to be an in-person gathering. That's in Las Vegas this year. It really represents the RPA members' annual meeting every year when that does take place, given the large gathering and the education program we put on. So that's something to consider. We may also look at an opportunity to meet alongside with our work in the Smarter Food Safety Initiative. And I could see us looking to get together with other groups in the back half of this year, again, to help move that initiative and the project that we're working on forward as well. Anybody have any other thoughts or questions associated with what we've been tracking and what we worked on at the last month's meeting? Okay, yeah, good. It was pretty straightforward, and it's only been a month, so we didn't have too much in terms of an update in a 4-week span on some of these topics in the work that we're doing that is remaining for the committee going forward. Let's go ahead and kick off this virtual meeting with, again, kind of an open discussion about topics that are related to the food and beverage market. And I listed as 3 questions here, as you can see on the slide page, that I'm hoping will prompt this discussion, provoke some insight, some thoughts. And I thought that would be relevant for us as we look at the bigger picture of reusable packaging systems in food applications. And the first, if just reaching out to those on the call here to get your opinion, is what are you seeing some of the biggest trends that are shaping food packaging in general for its packaging and distribution in the supply chain, perhaps outside of COVID-19 and some of the impacts which clearly continue to be at the forefront of our industry and its work. Where do you see some of the trends even beyond resolving or recovering from the pandemic that are really changing the way food is being packaged, handled, transported, to markets, for example? Anybody have any thoughts about maybe some of these bigger trends, these bigger picture items that are impacting your particular work in business development in the food marketplace? Anybody have any thoughts about maybe how technology, for example, is coming online? We certainly talk a lot about how that technology integration is the enabler to help with things like the Smarter Food Safety Initiative. But how about things like sensors, temperature control? Is the marketplace looking at how this data can be gathered in the supply chain? Is this something that you're seeing top of mind with your customers as you're looking to bring new solutions for their packaging?
Hey Tim, in terms of technology, I still think some of the technology applications have a pretty high cost of entry, especially into integration with reusable packaging. So I don't think they've caught on as much as some of the ideas about just using traditional barcodes as a form of smart data. But I do think we've seen, just in some customer interaction, more interest in how do reusables prove their sustainability. And I thought we talked about it on our introduction board call, but I think it's a good point. How are we as reusable companies proving that our operations are sustainable outside of the reuse aspect? And we do see customers caring about that more often.
Yeah, thanks, Aubrey. That's terrific. In fact, the whole point about cost of entry, let's say, that's a big topic throughout reusable packaging in general. But then when you're overlaying technology, we certainly think that that's an area for our industry to respond to in terms of that investment in technology, because in many cases that investment, like reusable packaging, has payback over a period of time. There could be some capital costs as far as equipment, devices, hardware, but also what that ROI could be. There's probably a real good story to tell. In fact, as an industry, that might be something we want to shed more light on. As we look in our education, sessions, whether it's panels, whether it's documents or papers, is that the cost of entry, may be a lot lower than what may be perceived, just from an investment and a payback position. So that's an interesting point and something that we may want to take a look at to help, further raise awareness about those opportunities.
Yeah, I think it definitely, especially in the food industry, is going to be a big topic on the calls that they had for smarter food safety. I would say at the end when they did question and answer, the two I attended, I would say 30% of the questions related to how did the FDA come up with this cost structure to implement the smarter food safety rules.
Thank you. I'd like to go back. I think there's a recorded in the archives, and yeah, follow that train of thought, because once again, that may be something we want to address with the government if they're instituting new rules and regulations about the need for digital tracking. And of course, we know that the combination of that technology to enable that tracking with products that are already established, like RPCs and pallets and bulk bins and IBCs, totes, etc., for food, that the pairing may be much easier to look at from a business ROI standpoint. What about, we talk about tracking, and of course, a lot of that is the Smarter Food Safety Initiative, as far as being able to have, instant product recall, traceability through the supply chain, understanding, the sourcing and the direction of the product as it goes from point A to point B. What about the temperature and other more quality elements associated with the movement of food? I mean, clearly, temperature monitoring, vibration shock, those are things that are often, coupled with technology, whether it's embedded into the sensor and can be able to, track that. An add-on benefit, let's just say, to having a device embedded within a reusable packaging product. I mean, do you see that sensory type technologies would be a significant opportunity for the food industry? Temperature sounds great, and it's certainly important for quality assurance. I think there's definitely value there. I'm just wondering if the market is asking for it, or is it seeing kind of this high end, do it very sparingly, maybe drop in a device within a full shipment or full load in the truck as it's moving across country. Is case level, that type of case level data generation, is that something of interest? But we know how food safety and certainly the quality is such an important area within the food and beverage market and related packaging. Um, I'll tell you, knock on wood, over the last, say, year or two, it's been pretty quiet on the food safety front. I think largely the corrugate industry, who loves to bring those issues up in terms of reusability versus single use, has probably been distracted and spent other time on other issues. But are we seeing again for any other issues on the food safety side of things, whether it's plant pathogens such as in greenhouses, or perhaps human risk assessments on a food safety. Fortunately, it's not been an issue that has popped onto the radar of this committee, and I think that largely has to do with the great work that your companies are doing in the marketplace, as far as not providing a reason for people to question or to raise issues or challenge related to the safe use of our products. But is food safety, and while it's an ongoing important aspect, do you see that as a trend in terms of the need for industries to address that associated with reusable packaging?
Hey, Tim, I definitely see it as a trend, but I don't think it's a trend where there's a lot of concern right now. So there aren't any many emerging issues that I've seen. There is a little concern that there could be another event like COVID-19, possibly something that would actually become a food safety concern rather than just a human pathogen concern. And there are we do see a lot of customers starting to ask more for more information. So they want to see more evidence of what programs they want us to follow and things that they're doing that they're either required to do from their professional groups or by the government.
Yeah, Aubrey, is that more like not necessarily certifications, but to be compliant to a particular standard out there? There's always these kind of unique food standards. There's a GFSI. Global Gap. Are those still reliant on for companies to be involved in those types of certifications related to food quality and safety?
I think the certifications, yeah, they'll always be something that customers look for because it's an easy way to answer all their questions without having to answer 50 questions. You can just be like, we're certified. But I do see more questions around like business practices. So are we using, are our companies using ethical hiring practices? Are we ethically sourcing raw materials? And some things that are being worked into the food safety or quality standards that aren't necessarily food safety and quality related.
It's interesting as you track broader sustainability initiatives or even economic in the world today, and the shift on issues of importance, especially from, let's say, the investment community. A lot about it is about corporate governance. It's about social community development. It's about resource conservation, labor fairness, whether it's a minimum wage, for example. It's interesting. You mentioned, you're right. It's not so much from a food safety, but now you're seeing really an impact on the broader sustainability, not necessarily environmental, but social, and that becomes a very difficult play. But it seems like that continues to be an area of high interest from the industry. And what are you doing about biodiversity, for example? Are your operations aiding in biodiversity, conservation? You're seeing that a lot more, and it's just amazing what those types of trends are having as far as corporate governance, for example.
Hey, Tim, it's Max. We're seeing something a little different. We're seeing the sustainability committees at big retailers or people in the departments just wanting measurables.
Yeah.
Like literally, like what can you hand us in terms of waste, carbon savings, all of this that we can put into our reports. I at least the trends that we're observing is actually the opposite, is that they're paying attention to like the real tangibles at this point. Right? Like amount of cardboard, amount of wood not tossed, rather than more like it's been theoretical for a while, and I'm just watching it change, that not necessarily groceries, but Costco, Depot, Lowe's, being much more focused on cost and waste and being able to like tout those things in their reporting.
That's excellent, Max, and you're right. Certainly, I think, like the global Walmart's Project Gigaton, for example, always seeking data from suppliers as far as what actions are being done that they could plug in as far as demonstrating, reduction of greenhouse gases, for example. And I think, what you mentioned as far as so many other companies, needing to be able to demonstrate and verify what actions are leading to. We actually talked at our board meeting last week about ESG investing, in particular about metrics for our industry. In other words, what can our members provide about reusable packaging that could be that data about that impact? Here, end user, a retailer, CPG company, if you switch to reusable packaging, these are sustainability metrics that go along with it. Or here's how you can input this into your sustainability reporting. And there's a lot to that, because we talk a lot about maybe reduction of waste or elimination of solid waste. There's been a lot of good LCAs that you can draw from, and EPA's own a database, the WARM model, where you can quantify what impacts it may be for reducing global emissions, for example. But they're also looking at other metrics, as you noted, and more data points. And that's an area that is even identified last week from our board that RPA may be able to play a role in looking at how our industry can be consistent to provide helpful metrics back to the user community.
Yeah, this is Kevin speaking. I guess I see a couple trends, mainly from the consumer point of view. So from the consumers, I see them, moving more towards wanting local. I see them wanting also more different tastes. So that's kind of a divergent with local, because maybe they want, global foods, but new tastes. I see in the types of foods that are coming forward that there's a huge trend towards plant-based. I don't know how that helps us in this committee, but there's a huge trend towards plant-based, and even, a new market for cannabis-related foods. I don't know how that helps us. And I think that consumers are also looking for, not damaging the planet. So sustainability still remains high on their list, and also they want it to be, their food to be a bit pure, right? So they want to know that it's free of whatever, free of, extra additives that aren't necessarily good for you. So with their emphasis on the consumers wanting to know more, I think it comes back to kind of where you started, which was people are going to be demanding, they want to have the information. They're going to be demanding more information in terms of where their food came from, how was it kept, how did it impact the world. And I'm not sure that this is necessarily going to be, I'm not sure whether it's retail led or whether it's consumer led, but I think, definitely the consumers will have a big play, and retailers will respond. And there's going to be a huge need for information on source, what happened to the food, and making sure that it's safe.
Yeah, excellent, Kevin. Thank you. You're right. I mean, even as consumers, all those trends you mentioned, while, it seems like 5 years, 10 years ago, half of those wouldn't be understood, right? Plant-based cannabis infused products. But at the end of the day, we look around, that's what's happening. But, you tying it into ultimately what our products in our industry is all about is as far as being able to, provide that quality, but do so in a way that can be, traced, can be verified from origin, can transmit and communicate product information. And those are things that I think could be very helpful, in the supply chain as they try and meet those goals. The other big trend, of course, is e-commerce. We see a lot of e-commerce in, I guess, traditional products, conventional products, but not necessarily in perishables yet. And I just saw, I think maybe a week or two ago, where Walmart has partnered with a company that actually is manufacturing almost like a big cooler that sits on the porch of someone's home, and it allows for Walmart to deliver groceries to put into the coolers, and it's got temperature and climate control in the cooler. And this is, I was thinking, gosh, it's going to be like a, who's doing that with a reusable tote or container, but it's actually like a big, not even a cooler that you would take to the park. It looks like much larger, where you can drop bags of groceries in, and has different compartments. But maybe that's going to be a breakthrough for the perishable items, in terms of delivery and e-commerce, and of course packaging to that point of operation. If they did have that, and you can fold up and put totes or crates and something in that cooler, or under secure measurement, where you can pull back. There may be some areas to that as that continues to expand, but that certainly seems another trend in the industry as far as that direct home shipment, and from our business, bypassing what could be a traditional distribution center in some reasons, from some ways. Okay, let's talk really this item B here about obstacles, and this is from the vantage point of the industry, saying, okay, what is currently holding down or impeding the opportunity for more users out in the marketplace, whether it's retail, food service, consumer product companies, and food producers. What is kind of those barriers to grow the reusable packaging industry? And RPCs at retail, pooled pallets, for example, through their operations. IBCs or bulk bins, going from more bulk commodities from farm to, say, retail stores. What would you say are some of those biggest obstacles on why we're not seeing this tremendous exponential growth in reusable packaging, when we know the value of it is been demonstrated and used quite frequently throughout operations for major companies? Anything that comes to mind as far as what those obstacles are? Why isn't reusable packaging the dominant packaging system for, say, fruits and vegetables and other perishable items? I know everybody on this call is like, well, it should be, right? I mean, well, we all agree that that reusable packaging should be the top of the pyramid as far as packaging used to distribute food, but clearly it's not. Clearly, single use and corrugate remains the dominant shipping platform for perishable items.
But Tim, it depends on what category you're looking at, right? Like, tomatoes get shipped from the field to tomato sauce manufacturers and IBCs, right? Like, in our case, live goods, vegetables, like, that are still alive, right? Plants, they get shipped on returnables or reusables, right? It's really as much just some of the growth, right? Like, bakery trays get reused. Lots of things do get reused. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is about just disposing it and inertia, right? As much as anything, and that there's no retail mandate, right? So in the case of like the racks that we rent that get shipped to Home Depot and Lowe's, it's because Home Depot and Lowe's won't take wood anymore, right? Because the cost was being borne onto them, right? And so until it's mandate, until you can't send a box of bananas, it's going to be cheaper, right? And then bakery and milk crates are just been around forever. But for us, we've seen it's been a push by the retailer to just flat out refuse has driven it as much as anything.
Yeah, thanks, Max. We've seen that play out in a variety of different ways, where the retailer, in some cases, would flex and say, hey, we're drawing a hard line in the sand as far as what we're going to accept. And then in other cases, there may be some more forgiveness, or, and there's less of a mandate, let's say, for different even commodities, let's say. Where cold and wet room items, traditionally have that, this is what we're going to accept, whether it's RPCs or reusables. But and then some other markets, it's like, well, we'll have exceptions, or we're not going to be as stringent with what those requirements are. So yeah, I mean, you're right. It almost varies when you break it down, even to segment, if not even to market as well.
Right, we're holding on to tens of thousands of beer kegs, actually over 100,000 beer kegs right now for a client because no one's drinking beer out of kegs, right? Like that's also just COVID. Like there's been a lot of movement towards single use rather than, restaurant, like if restaurants use reusables, but at home, the infrastructure isn't there. And I don't know about you guys, I don't drink enough beer to have it be keg quantity at home. And so, I mean, that's like another obstacle. It's just like the way food and beverage has been consumed has changed over the last year, right? And it's a lot more efficient to ship beer in a keg than it is in bottles, but right, no one's getting together anymore.
You know what I'm afraid of is that at some point when we turn the corner, everybody's just going to push out and go into the bars, and they're going to run out of the individual bottles, and that's something to think about. It's going to snap back pretty quickly. So all those who are supplying, there's going to be a beer keg shortage. I mean, you're going to have them all.
I can show you pictures of warehouses. We got plenty. There's not going to be a shortage, but I'll make my numbers for the year, so I'm okay with that.
Okay. That's great. Okay, well, yeah, you're right about that. A lot of this, certainly is to understand what maybe those obstacles are that a committee like this can, communicate on or educate if there's barriers that we think we can overcome, raising awareness. I've been in the food side of reusable packaging for a long time now. So in many ways, I know some of the barriers, and I even get frustrated by it. But a lot of that is more of the perishables, the retail, than anything else. But there's so much out there, and we just got to continue to make progress as far as overcoming what those barriers may be for broader acceptance of reusables. Well, let me end on something that I thought was an interesting addition as far as thinking about food waste. Food waste was one of just a few items that we identified early on, maybe 5 years ago when we set up the committee structure, is that food waste would be a major topic as an industry for us to address. In many cases, it was not only serving as playing a role in what is a serious problem out there in the distribution of food, and of course the impact of when you've got 30 to 40% of food that's produced is never consumed. That problem generally across the world, and its contribution to greenhouse gas emissions and waste and natural resources. I mean, it just goes on and on about how much of a disaster that really is. So what could we do to help? And looking at reusable packaging systems and the fact that they can extend shelf life of a lot of perishable products, for example, just in temperature management and cooling performance. There's a role that reusable packaging can play to helping with food waste. But I was kind of curious to see years now that we really haven't done a lot on the food waste, objective. And is that something that this committee feels that it's important as an industry? That maybe we should be doing more, finding a way to help tackle or bring solutions to the party as far as communicating about reusables and its benefit as a part of the solution to tackling food waste. Anybody have any thoughts on that related to the wasted opportunities out there with food?
Hey, Tim, do you have any numbers around or case studies on how using a returnable or reusable would decreases food waste or increases longevity?
There is. Now, that's an interesting question because a lot of the data that's generated is related to the preservation of product quality, the effective cooling and temperature management from point of packing to point of sale. That does lead to increasing the shelf life of products because you're basically preventing hotspots from taking place throughout the journey of the food, and therefore maintaining that that ripening in many cases, or that preserving of that quality based on temperature. The data has been out there. In many cases, a lot of the arguments is about saving money because you're reducing shrinkage or food waste from the distribution side, or from culling food waste at the retail because it's an unsaleable. But I don't think there's not been anything in which that data has been, say, pooled together or has been raised into a central argument related to food waste. But that, that's something that would be an interesting exercise, provided that a lot of our members could, share perhaps evidence and data that's been developed as far as temperature management related to reusables versus single use. I've done it myself in terms of generated that data, so I know it's out there, whether it's, strawberries or, bananas or, leafy greens and other things. So, that could be an area for us to look at.
Yeah, we do a lot of modeling having to do with both cubing trucks and shrink, right? In our case, shrink is as much about like damage and sell-through, right? But it's similar modeling of like, if your plant dies, right? If your plant dies before it gets there, or it dies 2 days after arriving, that's shrink, or its opposite, sell-through, right?
Yeah. I'll bring up a couple others. I see Cherry here from Livery, and again, there a lot of the data that they have with their wine tote is involves around that preservation of the quality of the wine within the temperature that's needed before it would go bad, and you see issues as far as the shipments where a lot of vineyards or producers, bottlers need to hold back because they don't want to ship it at certain times of the year based on temperature issues and problems. So, that's another good example of reusables and data that's out there, even beyond, well, I guess wine is a perishable item, but, the idea is that it extends beyond, say, fruits, vegetables, proteins and other things. The other one is, I know the industry is getting a lot more into seafood, which of course I would imagine has a huge premium on temperature control. Floral, that's something that we've looked in the past as far as what distribution of and the waste that's generated with shipping a floral from, say, Colombia, Guatemala, Ecuador into the U.S. markets, and that's one that I always thought would turn pretty quickly in terms of converting to a reusable packaging system into retail. So these are areas where while we look at it from an economic and a saleable, for not necessarily from a waste, they do tie together, and I think a good story could be told there. Well, something to consider, and one of the exercise here, at least for today, is kind of prioritizing. Right, it gets to a point where, as a committee, you only can do so much. I'm kind of from the school. I'd rather do one thing really, really well than a bunch of things just kind of moving forward at a much slower pace. And so, oftentimes when we look to set the agenda, as we look to spearhead opportunities for the committee, it's kind of picking out one or two things that we think we could, hit a home run with in regards to the time and the resources we have here. I do think the technology enablement with the FDA Smarter Food Safety Initiative is one of them. I think the opportunities associated with that related to the promotion of reusable packaging for food use is unparalleled in terms of what we think we can offer, where, say, single use just cannot match as far as that technology capability. So that's one that we're definitely going to continue. I was curious, what other areas that we think as an industry, more particularly as a committee, that we may be able to advance in terms of education, raising awareness about the opportunity. And one example would be utilizing a education program or a session or a panel at one of our events in the future, where we could talk about the topics and continue to promote it. Or we could produce a webinar, for example, that's dedicated to the topic of metrics for sustainability or for food waste. These are things that the feedback here helps us collect about pitching potentially ideas and projects that we may want to come back to the committee and see if it's got legs for us to devote the time and energy to. Anybody have any other thoughts about trends, impediments in the food and beverage market, things that you might have heard that maybe a head scratcher out there in this kind of new age of pandemic recovery that's kind of challenging all norms? Anything else on the mind as we look at the market and as we look ahead this year with the committee? Okay, great. Well, once again, utilizing these committee calls for this type of open discussion and kicking around ideas or observations in the market, we want to continue to do that and provide for that level of member engagement, on these virtual calls. And, hopefully, again, one day soon we can do it in person. So really the takeaway from what I have here on a variety of different areas is we're still going to pursue the technology role. We'll continue that. We've got a lot of things on the pipeline at RPA to talk about, technology as applied to reusable packaging systems here, particularly with a far smarter food safety initiative. The ESG part, as far as measurables or metrics, that's something we are going to look at it more broadly across the reusable packaging industry. I think we've identified that as a kind of a real interesting opportunity at the board level about how RPA can help facilitate the communication to the investment community, to corporations in their reporting, and what that could mean as far as reusable packaging, demonstrating or validating that important role to sustainability initiatives on the economic side of the business. But also with food waste, I'd like to keep that alive as well, in terms of maybe what data we could gather across our membership that could tell a great story. To my colleague Hillary, perhaps we look at a 2021 blog post that we could write that maybe pools industry together, looks at data, and talks about specifically how reusable packaging can be an advantage to help reduce food waste in the distribution of the food. I think a majority of the food waste, the data out there shows that most of it takes place at point of retail to the consumer, not necessarily from farm to distribution center. So that back end of the supply chain is really where we've got issues related to a majority of the waste taking place. Well, again, not a shortage of issues to talk about, but certainly as we fine tune what may be a 2021 action plan for the committee and things we want to spend time and resources on, this has been helpful, at least for staff at RPA here to figure out ultimately what can help advance with our agendas and how we can bring more discussion and expertise to our conversations going forward. Okay, the final topic I've got is committee resources. We've talked about a few of them in terms of our meetings and some of the things that we can do. We've set our budget. We do have, as a committee, $10,000 budgeted for spend this year related to committee activities. And I'm really hoping that a portion of that could be used in setting up in-person meetings and other gatherings for the committee at the back end of this year. But if we ever wanted to use some funds to support an initiative, to outsource perhaps some work, or to bring in a consultant to help us do some R&D or some research, we do have some seed money to work with as a committee. So as you look at ideas, things that you might have pulled away from this call, or maybe you brainstorm something in the near future and saying, gosh, this could be an industry achievement. This is something the committee could benefit from, and the members who are participating, but we may need a couple $1,000s to do it. We have those resources. I certainly look every year to maximize the opportunity for us to invest in the work of the committee, whatever that may look like. So keep that in mind, that we do have some funds that we can allocate towards committee projects and spend that money to help us advance and ultimately hit some deliverables associated with the projects that we're undertaking here. Anybody have any thoughts or comments about the committee at large? We are scheduled for a meeting again in 2 months. Again, reserving an opportunity to come together on in between as we may find there's an opportunity to do so. Anybody have any thoughts about the committee this year? Anything else that we should be tackling? Okay. Well, you can always contact me or Hillary if you have any other thoughts or follow up. If you got some information to share, please do so. And we'll continue to push out information to our members as far as RPA activities. I'll be back in touch with some new direction and some movement on the Smarter Food Safety Initiative and the traceability plan. Anything that pops out up there with COVID-19 related to food, please let me know. We continue to want to be responsive to that issue. And advise if you're interested in the committee chair role. We'd love to, have one of you, step up to help us more lead the agenda items and the projects associated with the committee. And would enjoy working, with you more closely as we try and continue to push forward action from this committee that's going to be of value to the membership. Okay, everyone, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it today, and all the feedback on these topics and an open discussion. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll be definitely in touch soon.
Thanks.
Thanks. Take
Thanks,
care.
Tim.
Thank you.
Tim.